The Kokiri are a very mysterious race who only make an appearance in Ocarina of Time and the Wind Waker as the Koroks. This race is said to be the spirits of the forest created by the Great Deku Tree. Under the protection of the Deku Tree himself, these Kokiri lived peacefully. But what would happen if they left the forest? Could the Great Deku Tree's death have been the demise of the race? What happened to the Kokiri in the Downfall timeline and the Child timeline? Join RMFH and I as we uncover what exactly happened to the Kokiri after the timeline split in Ocarina of Time.
We'll start off with the Downfall timeline. This is where Link dies at the end of Ocarina of Time in the fight against Ganondorf. Everything leading up to this part in the game still happens. Link collected all 3 spiritual stones, traveled to the future using the Master Sword, cleared all the temples and collected each medallion, and in the end fought Ganondorf atop his castle. So this is the closest we get to the adult timeline. That being said, after Link finished up at the Forest Temple, he was transported back to where the Great Deku Tree resides in Kokiri Forest. Upon arriving, Link met the Great Deku Tree Sprout. This little guy was given the chance to grow only because Link lifted the curse on the Forest Temple, but he was not found anywhere in A Link to the Past, and neither are the Kokiri. Where the heck did these guys go?
We may be able to find some hints as to what caused the disappearance of the Great Deku Tree and the Kokiri in the prologue of A Link to the Past. Long ago, in Hyrule, a beautiful kingdom surrounded by forests and mountains, legends told of an omnipotent and omniscient golden power that lay hidden. It was hidden in a sacred realm beyond the reach of men. But one day, a doorway to that realm was suddenly opened. Hoping to claim the golden power as their own, the people began to quarrel and fight. Many sought to enter the hidden golden land, but none returned. Evil power began to issue forth from the dark portal. So the king commanded 7 sages to seal the gate to the land of the golden power. The main thing we are looking at here is the fact that the seal on the sacred realm seems to have been broken. More evidence of the seal being broken can be found in Hyrule History on page 93. In the book, it mentions that the Knights of Hyrule battled demons that crept forth from within the sacred realm. This means that someone had to have opened it, or at least enough to allow people in and demons out. And the only known way to open the door to the sacred realm is by collecting the 3 spiritual stones and having the ability to pull the Master Sword from its pedestal. At least in Ocarina of Time, that is. With the Hero of Time dying in this timeline, it's safe to say that the Master Sword was simply not used to seal away Ganondorf after he obtained the Triforce. But the 3 spiritual stones accompanied by the power of the 7 sages was likely good enough. Seeing as the 3 spiritual stones couldn't just sit in the Temple of Time, it's likely that each spiritual stone was given back to each race, or sage that it rightfully belonged to. This would put the Kokiri Emerald in the hands of either Saria or the Deku Tree Sprout.
Having any of these spiritual stones would likely get you into some trouble during the Imprisoning War. With the ever-increasing hunger for the power of the Triforce, the people of Hyrule would have went to extreme measures to get any information on how to open the door to the Sacred Realm. The Deku Tree's alliance with the Hylians must have soon faltered after the start of the war, leaving Kokiri Forest open to attacks from the Hylians. With the news of Ganondorf's deeds and the location of the Sacred Realm spreading around, it's possible that someone in Hyrule found out about the spiritual stones and ventured to each province of Hyrule, taking them as they wished, killing anyone in their path. The Deku Tree Sprout would be one easy target. He's small and stationary, and from what we've seen, he can only protect Kokiri Forest from demons, not Hylians. After being cut down for the Kokiri Emerald, the Great Deku Tree would no longer be around to protect the Kokiri tribe. So what happens to the Kokiri if the Great Deku Tree isn't around anymore? We can find our answer in Ocarina of Time. At the beginning of the game in Kokiri Forest, if you head over to the entrance to Hyrule, a Kokiri will tell you, "The Great Deku Tree said if we ever leave these woods, we will die." There's also a sign beside him that says, "Forest folk shall not leave these woods." Now, this can be interpreted differently, but I think it simply means that the Kokiri would be defenseless if they left the forest. Think about it, the Hyrulean Civil War had ended prior to the events of Ocarina of Time. The Great Deku Tree must have told the Kokiri to stay in the forest in order to shield them from the fires of war and the many monsters that inhabited the area. Along with wanting to protect the Kokiri, the Great Deku Tree also gave these guys the ability to be immortal upon their creation. This can be shown in Ocarina of Time after becoming an adult. If you travel back to Kokiri Forest, you'll notice that none of them have grown up, showing that something is granting them the ability to live very long lives, if not forever. Though the Great Deku Tree dies at the beginning of the game, the Kokiri still held this power. This is due to the fact that the Kokiri still remain in the forest with their fairies, and the Deku Tree sprout is still technically around. He just hasn't sprouted due to the curse. The mix in magic between the fairies and the Great Deku Tree could be the reason why the Kokiri lived for so long. Fairies are known to have healing abilities throughout the series. Each Kokiri is born with a fairy, and as we know, it's said that the Deku Tree created the Kokiri. The combination of the two could very well be how they live for so long. Upon venturing out of the woods, the Kokiri would lose their fairies, lifting whatever magic they had been born with, thus enabling them to grow up. The reason I say they lose their fairies is because of two interesting facts I'd like to point out. One is at the end of the adult timeline, a scene is shown with the Kokiri in Lon Lon Ranch. This shows that the Kokiri can in fact live outside of Kokiri Forest, but there's also one other little detail. They don't have fairies. Not enough? In the Wind Waker, the Koroks don't have fairies either, and it's said that they took on the plant-like form they have because of leaving the forest. All of this shows that the Kokiri rely heavily on magic. If that is fully taken away from them, they simply become human. So where is the evidence of this in A Link to the Past, you ask?
It's actually right near the Lost Woods. In the Game Boy Advanced version of the game, you can find a lumberjack that is living in a house next to the northeast entrance to the woods. After completing 4 swords in A Link to the Past, he will send you on a quest, and after completing it, he'll teach you a sword technique called the Whirlwind Sword Attack. Many of the tasks he sends you on takes place in the Lost Woods. This guy also has 2 other brothers. This could be a reference to the 3 know-it-all brothers from Ocarina of Time. After all, A Link to the Past was revamped for Game Boy Advance. Besides all of that, Lumberjacks translates to Kokiri in Japanese. Switch the I and the O and you've got Kokiri. Another possible descendant of the Kokiri could be the Flute Boy, as he turns into a tree after playing his flute and completing a side quest. He wears a similar outfit to that of the Kokiri, and the lumberjacks found near the Lost Woods. But there really isn't much information to back that up. All in all, it seems that the Kokiri disappeared completely from this side of the timeline, leaving only slight hints to what may have happened to them. Next up is the child timeline. This timeline starts off with Link being sent back to the past at the exact moment he met Zelda. So this means that the original Great Deku Tree still died at the hands of Ganondorf prior to this. But since Ganondorf never placed the curse on the Forest Temple, the Deku Sprout would have had no problem sprouting. This would leave the Kokiri and the Great Deku Tree untouched for a very long time, allowing the newly sprouted Deku Tree to grow and mature. You'd think with Hyrule assuming being peaceful in between Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess that the Kokiri would still be around later on in the child timeline. But they aren't, and neither is the Great Deku Tree. Something very unfortunate must have happened to cause their disappearance. But what?
The destruction of humans. This was likely the driving force that caused the Kokiri to pull a Houdini. In Twilight Princess, Link starts off in Ordon Village, and this village is connected to Faron Woods. Ordon Village likely isn't where Kokiri Village used to be. As we can see on this map, Ordon is set up more towards the back of the woods, but if you look closely, the entrance to Faron Woods is closer to Hyrule Field. Since Kokiri Village was just a stone throw away from Hyrule Field in Ocarina of Time, Faron Woods is most likely what is left of Kokiri Forest. From the way it seems, the people who lived in Ordon Village must have moved in on the territory of the Kokiri, cutting down trees and making room for themselves in the forest. Somehow the Deku Tree was killed. Either he was poisoned like the one before him, or these Hylians encroaching on his territory somehow led to his demise. Evidence of this can be found in the Forest Temple in Twilight Princess. The whole temple takes place in a tree, and all the doors have the Kokiri symbol on them. This leads into a whole other theory, but we aren't going down that rabbit hole today, my friends. Since the Deku Tree is very wise, and he knew of his demise in Ocarina of Time before it happened, it's plausible that he somehow changed the Kokiri into the monkeys that live in Faron Woods, upon realizing that he would no longer be around to protect them. In doing so, he helped the Kokiri adapt to their environment, while also keeping the Hylians from causing any harm to his children. Seeing as the Kokiri somehow magically changed into the Koroks in the Wind Waker, I don't think it's outlandish to assume. To top it off, each one of these monkeys seems to have a birthmark or a tattoo of the Kokiri symbol somewhere on their bodies, and they seem to know of various locations around Faron Woods, like the Sacred Grove. This side of the timeline is a bit easier to explain when it comes to the Kokiri and the Deku Tree, but either way, both explanations were tons of fun to come up with.
It seems we've made it to the end of this theory, so I'll go ahead and summarize the fate of the Kokiri in either timeline. In the Downfall timeline, the Deku Tree sprout was cut down by Hylians in search of the 3 spiritual stones. Since the Kokiri had no deity to follow, they decided to move on from the Lost Woods to see what Hyrule had in store for them. Since the Kokiri can't keep their fairies after leaving the forest, they lost the last remaining magic, keeping a hold on their immortality, causing them to grow up and pass on their traditions to descendants, like the lumberjacks and the flute boy found in A Link to the Past. As for the child timeline, the Kokiri and the Deku Tree sprout were left to live in peace for many generations, giving the Deku Tree sprout time to grow into what we now know as the Forest Temple and Twilight Princess. Because the Hylians began to close in on the forest surrounding the Kokiri and the Great Deku Tree, it caused an imbalance in the forest, somehow weakening the Deku Tree enough to pass on, similar to the one before him. Before the Great Deku Tree passed on, he changed the Kokiri into monkeys, in order to protect them from being stuck down or captured by the Hylians. This timeline led to the unfortunate death of the Deku Tree, but enabled the Kokiri to at least live on in a different form more adapted to their environment. Hey everyone, this is Jesse, or Game Over Jesse. I just want to take the time to thank you all for watching this Zelda theory on the Kokiri. They're one of my favorite races in the Zelda series, and I'm grateful that RMFH had me on to collaborate on this theory. Please subscribe to stay up to date with all that he's doing on his channel. And if you want to see even more Zelda theories, come on over to my channel and check out all the Zelda news, theories, and rumor videos that I have. And once again, thank you for watching.